Welcome to Trial by Wine. We take a closer look at crimes that highlight how fascinating humans can be. Schmidty, Swanee and Clarkey visit crimes and run them through their jury of three, debating both sides of the case to agree an appropriate, if totally fictitious, sentence. Please be advised, Trial by Wine may include explicit or disturbing content and will include drunken rambling. Listener discretion is advised. All right, how are we?
Good, thank
Very
you.
well, thanks. How are you?
Good.
Little off-air giggle.
Yep. Just getting the vibes from Clarkey, that's all. Always good vibes. Always good vibes. Any news in our short break?
Negative. No.
Negative.
No, Tori. No, zip.
Oh, okay. Neither do I. I went to the toilet, turned the heater off upstairs.
Did it go viral?
No, it didn't, thank God. No, thankfully my toileting did not go viral. It wouldn't have been very exciting if it had. It was just a wee anyway.
What a load of old shit.
Exactly, right? So with no news, I suppose we should introduce ourselves. I'm Schmidty.
I'm Swanee.
And I'm Clarkey. And together we are Trial
by
Wine.
Ooh, and what are we drinking? That was the most exciting trial by wine you guys have done for ages. What have you got there, Swanee?
It's alcoholic. I don't want to get too excited.
What?
It's a vodka and soda, pine lime. It's
Beautiful.
I took them to a little school party that we had the day we had to BYO, and you had to take your own glass. And I went, I can't be bothered with any of that. So I took this, but they were quite nice. I don't know what the brand's called. It's called
150 episode
Rule.
drought?
Yeah, a drought. Yeah.
I'm just feeling a little bit pressured by Schmidty. That was all. Anyway.
Good. I'm glad you are.
Yeah,
Yes,
nothing like
there you
drinking
go.
because of peer pressure.
Well, there
I
you go.
didn't say bring 12 up and scull them. I just
No.
said, I think you should have a drink. If you don't have to go
For
anywhere
therapeutic
else,
purposes.
you might, need to have some medicine during this story.
No, I don't think I need.
Okay. Cool. And boys, what about you?
Well,
Still
our
on the
big news is
smuggles?
we also went and got some.
Oh, good job.
Yeah,
What is it?
so we've got a Tinto, but it's in a
Wow. A
little
cooler.
stubby holder thing to keep it nice.
Oh, I didn't understand what I was looking at then. I was thinking, that's fancy. That was the
Fancy.
holder, right?
They
How very
are fancy,
futuristic.
Are they like stainless steel double walled?
Are they cold on the outside?
And a rubber top.
No, they're nice on the outside,
Oh,
Mm.
but cold on the inside.
oh that's
Yeah, they've
good
got a
for
rubber
winter
lip
drinking.
on them. It's
Mm.
very
Oh.
good.
That stops your tin slipping out and smacking you in the face.
I mean,
Mhm.
because that happens all the time, right?
This was quite big for me. I'm not used to drinking out of a big can.
Oh, no.
Oh,
You'll
Hmm.
be, wrap your lips around it. You'll be
bit
sweet.
of a handful.
Yeah, put that on. let that go viral.
Yeah.
Swanee drinking from a big can.
It's a big can.
It's not a buddy, but it's close enough.
No, it's not a buddy. She objects to that. Yeah.
No. it's
Well,
not funny.
I've changed. I'm drinking still
On the
tonic
water.
water.
That looks
No,
like
no.
water now.
Still tonic, but I'm having a bit of gin with it this time. So I'm
Ah.
having the Papa Salt Coastal Gin, which was sent to me by Swanee last year, or the year before, actually.
How's it? It mustn't be very good if you've still got it. Must be
I
shocking.
No, I won't say I went off gin, but I reduced the amount that I drink of gin and of anything, frankly, in probably the last 12 months. So it's not an indictment on the beverage itself. It's just I changed some of my habits. Yes. So that's why there is still. And look, in fairness, there's not much left.
Fair-
See?
oh, yeah, I can see
So
it.
There's
Yep.
only probably an eighth left.
It
maybe?
looks like you could fill it up with not shampoo, bubble bath, something. Do you know, there's something about
You're
it reminds
right,
me
it's
of
a nice
like an
bottle.
Avon bubble bath thing
Mm.
from the 80s or something.
I hadn't
Can
thought of that.
reuse
It's quite
it.
right. I might keep the
reusable,
bottle.
reusable
Yeah.
bubble bath.
Good idea.
With a hint of gin.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit ginny.
Gin bath,
Yeah.
gin waters. Yeah,
Why not? Shall I tell you all a story?
please do.
Okay.
Well, I'm a bit worried about this one because I believe it's been a long time in the making.
It has, inasmuch as it was inspired and connected to the last two stories that I told. Well, the double-parters, the two-parter that I told last time. That story, of course, was the story of David Zack, who was imprisoned for the murder of Derrance Stevenson. And I know it took
course.
us a while to get over the fact his name was Derrance. What did we say it was? It was
We're Dennis and Terence.
Dennis and Terence. Anyway, that was his name. And when I'd started that case, it was because I was looking for bodies concealed in freezers. But what I didn't account for was the direction it would take me. So the story I'm telling today is really grotesque. So trigger warnings up front. Yep, this story will include sexual assault, brutal sexual torture, mutilation and dismemberment.
All right, I'm out.
I actually don't go into massive detail about that, in fairness.
Like eating a roast chicken, when you get them and you cut the wings off and the legs off. And
a little, yeah, a bit like that, but worse. Also, it's set in Adelaide. So I'm just doing my bit to prove that Victoria is not the only place in Australia that has some pretty bad things happen. You are welcome, visit Victoria. So my sources, and it's quite the list, are Crime Investigation Australia, which is available on Foxtel. The episode was Series 1, Episode 16, referred to as The Butchered Boys. Bit of a clue there. Podcast called The Conspiracy Files on YouTube. The episode was called The Family Paedophile Ring, Australia's Darkest Conspiracy. www.netk.net.au, the document by Dr. Robert Moles, who I also used as a source for the Derrance Stevenson case. SMH, so sydneymorningherald.com.au, adelaideNow.com.au, unresolved.me, www.bigfooty.com, Reddit, Wikipedia, The Telegraph, Crime Stoppers South Australia, theheraldsun.com.au, thedailymail.co.uk and theage.com.au.
Can I just interrupt there?
Yes.
Bigfooty.com, not a football program.
It is a forum, and I did talk about it in the Derrance Stevenson case, but it didn't have as much about Derrance Stevenson and David Zack as I needed. But for some reason, there's this massive, 170-page string of people talking about this case. So
nothing to do with footy.
No, all about this case. And one of the people who contributes to it is allegedly the brother of one of the victims. So it's quite interesting. And people will come in and out and they give their ideas, and then he'll come in and say, that's all bullshit and blah, blah. And by the way, you may recall in the Derrance Stevenson case, I made reference to Debbie Marshall, who was the investigative journalist who did Frozen Lies or whatever it was called.
Yeah.
She's covered this story as well. I don't use her as a reference at all, but John Barnes is not a fan of hers either. So I felt slightly vindicated. John Barnes is the brother of one of the victims.
From bigfooty.com.
From another fame, but yes, from that. So, as you may have guessed, we're back in 1979 in the timey-wimey machine. Derrance Stevenson, just to recap, was killed on the 4th of June, and we went through the case of whether or not David, his young lover, was responsible, and concluded that he could have been, but there wasn't really any hard evidence. And given he was in Cooper Pedy the next day and was witnessed by others from 5:30 onward, it would have been a very tight period of time.
And that drives a bitch.
It is a bitch, and he definitely got bogged a couple of times and broke down and all that sort of stuff. And more importantly, I think the level of the cleanup job to clean up the crime scene and put Derrance in the freezer and all that sort of stuff, it would have been a pretty tight period of time for him to do all of that and then scarper to Cooper Pedy. So it really does put a question mark in my mind over whether or not David Zack had anything to do with or was part of but didn't do the cleanup or whatever. So what has it got to do with the case that I'm about to talk about?
Yep. What is
Nothing.
Okay.
Well.
Good segue.
Seamless. Schmidty, seamless.
Nothing that I can prove. But there are some very interesting threads from Derrance's case that then pulled me into looking at a series of murders that would come to be known as the family murders. As you may recall, though you probably won't, Swanee, that 1979 Adelaide was a swinging place.
What was the name of the premier? I thought he was quite
Don
cute.
Dunstan.
Oh, yeah.
Don Dunstan. That was my big takeout.
Fancy Pants Dunstan, I
Fancy
think.
Pants, Don
That's
Dunstan.
the one, yeah.
You have pink shorts in Parliament.
Pink safari suit or something. Bermuda shorts.
Pink shorts in Parliament, yes, that's right. Homosexuality had been legalised, and the Premier, Don Dunstan, who happened to be bisexual himself, was keen for Adelaideans to improve themselves with art, fine food and culture. The gay scene and cock and bum fun, yes. The gay scene was blooming, with the banks of the Torrens a hot spot for men to meet under the cover of darkness.
Who knew?
Whilst the police had famously hunted gays in the early 1970s, remember I told you about George
Famously
Duncan?
Hunted gays. What a phrase.
Well, it was famous because George Duncan, remember George Duncan, the lecturer from Torrens University, who was killed by the police when they threw him into the river and he drowned. Remember that? That's what made it famous, that they were hunting the gays. Yeah. By the late 1970s, a certain enclave of Adelaide
Did they call
society,
it gaying? Like when you hunt whales, you call it whaling? Oh, we're just going out to do some gaying.
No.
How fabulous.
And, yeah, I'm not sure that would have been the way they spoke of it, yeah. They were brutish, horrible people who were homophobic and actually a little connection to the episode you just did. They had the gay panic in them and they were just homophobic, horrible, monstrous people who used that to justify doing horrendous things. Simple. By the late 1970s, a certain enclave of Adelaide society seemed to be having a wild time. Or, put another way, they were enjoying drug-fueled homosexual events.
That's right.
Oh, what was the name of my company? I've forgotten.
Yeah.
Drug-fueled homosexual events.
That's it.
DFH events. That's it. DFH events.
So you'll recall Derrance was famous for his soirees. Friday nights with the boys, where young men who had been procured for him by Gino Gambardella would show up and quite possibly a few other fellas.
Mall.
Yeah, well, from anywhere really. And quite possibly a few other fellas from Adelaide would join in. David said a couple of days prior to Derrance being murdered, Derrance had received a phone call. And in that phone call, he got quite agitated and he said to whoever he was talking to, no, I'm out. And then like within 24 hours or something, he said to David, after speaking to Gino Gambardella,
you're off.
Take the car, get out of Adelaide. And then, of course, within 24 hours or less, Derrance was dead. Then there was the young man with shoulder-length blonde hair who showed up at Legal Aid the day after Derrance's murder. We never found out who he was, but we know that it wasn't David, and whoever it was said he'd seen Derrance the night before and he wasn't, and remember he used the expression something like he wasn't in any fit state to help me or something like that. Yeah. And the guy who dressed up and took the briefcase and garbage bag to the mall by the taxi at 11 p.m., he also had long hair. Also, the taxi driver who picked him up recalled. And what's the word I'm looking for? You know, when you've got hair that's sort of a bit stuck to your head. I keep wanting to say lanky, but that's not what I mean. You know, when your hair's a bit greasy or a bit.
Oh, yeah.
What's the expression when someone's got long hair and it's sort of a bit flat, Carla? You know, like
wash your fucking hair.
Yeah.
Unkept. Manky? I don't know.
Anyway.
I don't know.
There's a word that they use. I can't remember what it is. There's a word they use to describe his hair, and that's what they mean. It's got that sort of slightly unwashed kind of look. That guy had that kind of look about him. But we don't know who he is, right? And he was the one who said, oh, that's the most important part. Remember, there was like all these sort of weird little things that witnesses came out at the time and said had happened that we're not really sure how to connect to anything. But yeah. And there was one bit of info in that case that I didn't make a fuss of, but it's also worth remembering. When David first met Derrance, he was introduced by Gino. And there was another guy there at the time that people referred to as Joe, and he worked for Gino. The scuttlebutt is that his real name was Darko Castellan. So just remember that. And that is a quick recap on the previous case. So now let's talk about Alan Barnes. Alan was a pretty happy young 17-year-old, the son of English.
John's brother.
Yes, John's brother. Yeah.
Right.
John is his younger brother. The son of John Barnes, who I mentioned earlier.
Bigfooty.com.
She doesn't not just remember a case or a story after it's been told. She doesn't remember it within moments of it being told.
This is my best. I'm not surprised.
Sorry, Swanee. I have to take my laughs where I can in this, right?
That's all right.
Thank you.
That's all right.
So Alan, who is the older brother of John Barnes, who is a contributor allegedly to bigfooty.com, one of my sources.
Okay.
Alan was pretty happy 17-year-old, the son of English migrants. He grew up in Salisbury, Adelaide. His mum described him as quick-witted, always making people laugh, a bit cheeky. Growing up in an increasingly liberated city, Alan was at that age of experimentation and was known to smoke a bit of weed. On the weekend, he and his friend, Darko Castellan, were hanging out. And they were witnessed to be at some gay bars and clubs, but there's nothing to say what sexuality Alan was. Some people suggest that he was homosexual. Some people say he was straight, whatever. And at the time, it seemed those clubs and bars were the cool place to be at. So, you know, he could have been either. Didn't really matter, yeah. what I'm trying to say is hanging out at a gay club doesn't make you
Mean you're
gay.
No.
Correct.
Darko said he last saw Alan hitchhiking down Grand Junction Road on the afternoon of the Sunday, the 17th of June, just 13 days after Darren Stevenson was murdered. He said they spent the weekend together with Friday and Saturday nights at the Old Lion Hotel. Then they tried to get a lift home to Salisbury, so they were hitchhiking. But after a while, Darko was like, if we're trying to get there together, no one's going to pick us up, so we should separate. And so he managed to get in a car, got picked up, and he said the last thing he saw of Alan was he was walking along Grand Junction Road. Other passers-by saw Alan get into, and Alan, by the way, had shoulder-length blonde hair. They saw him getting into a white Holden sedan, which had several men in it. Alan unfortunately didn't make it home, and his mother reported him missing on Monday, the 18th of June.
How old was Darko? Was he also a young person, teenager at that time?
Yeah.
Oh, he was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe 17, 18, but yeah, quite young. Yeah. So,
but did you not just say that Darko? Oh, I must get that confused. I thought you were saying Darko was with
the assistant
with Terence when David
Gino.
said, but he would have been too young, would he? How old would he have been then? Because that was years before, wasn't it? A couple of years?
Hang on. No, at this point, Terence
is dead.
No, Terence is dead, but David at this point is only 19.
Correct.
So,
but how old was
David?
Darren?
Was 15, I think, when he met, just turning 16. So it was 3 years earlier.
Okay.
Darko could have been 21 for all I know, right? So
but he's still a young person. I had him at the same age as the other guy who
No, he's
went
younger.
off to Italy or whatever.
Yeah, no.
Okay, fair enough.
Gino was in his 30s, I think, or close.
Okay, so Darko was that's what just threw me there, right? Because then I had him placed with Gino. So right. Yeah. So Darko's a young person, great friends with Alan Barnes. They've been out on the 17th
friends
of June.
With Alan Barnes. I don't know if he's great friends with Alan Barnes. He's certainly friends with Alan Barnes.
Hanging out
enough
with
that
they're
going
out for a night. Yeah.
Goes to the gay clubs.
Yeah,
hanging
out. And on the 17th of June, 13 days after Terence has been
murdered,
and
stuck in a freezer.
Alan's gone missing, and Mum's called on Monday morning, the 18th,
Correct.
and said, "Hey,
Alan's seen missing. Getting in a car, a white Holden, and he's never seen again alive. And his mother's reported him missing. That's right." So on June 24th, 1979, the body of Alan Barnes was found beneath the South Para Bridge near Williamstown. Okay, buckle up at this description. Alan's body appeared to have been thrown over the side of the bridge but missed the water and landed in the dirt.
Oh,
as a result, his spine was broken. However, the autopsy revealed he had died prior to the injury, between 24 and 48 hours earlier. His body showed signs of being beaten and tortured. Okay, and this is the awful bit, well, one of the awful bits. However, his cause of death was blood loss caused by an anal injury, likely caused by the insertion of a blunt object. He had Noctec, a sedative, in his system and was likely drugged. His body had been completely washed and he was wearing clothes that didn't belong to him.
And that was how much? That was 24 minus 24 to 24. So he was alive with
2-3 days.
With
2-3 days maybe. Yeah. It got picked up on the 17th.
Yeah.
So the 22nd, so 3-4 days maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was that, do we know what day the 17th was?
The Sunday. It was a Sunday. And so the Monday was the 24th. Sorry, the Monday or the 18th is when Mum reported him.
So it wasn't a DFH event that was on a Sunday night, was it? They would have been earlier in the weekend.
There wasn't a DFH event that he participated in consensually on the weekend that caused this. Yeah.
No, what I wondered was he abducted for the purpose of... He
didn't go to a soiree, no.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. No. Yes and no is what I'm going to say. He was abducted for the purpose of someone having some kind of a
Yeah, but not one of the
But not one of the Darren Stevenson's ones. No, and Darren's is dead at this point, yeah. What we don't know is whether Alan was the young man who presented to legal aid. He kind of fit the description that the secretary at the time gave.
Back in early June.
Yeah. So he showed up on the 5th, I think it was, of June.
Yeah.
Someone showed up at legal aid on the 5th of June looking for help. Now, he did have
and said that he was in no condition.
He said when he saw Darren the night before, he was in no condition to help anyone.
Yeah.
But we don't know if it was Alan, but there is a theory that it could have been. He did have a case pending, and some sources suggest that Darren was to be his defence lawyer and had defended him on previous things, but I couldn't find anything to corroborate that. It's interesting, though, that the young man at legal aid was never seen again or identified, and Alan died only 12 days later. Also interesting is the connection between Gino Gambardella, Darko, and Alan Barnes. The police started investigating and were following up all the leads around the white Holden sedan and anything that the witnesses told them. The fact that he'd been so brutalised made them think the killing must have been personal and not a random attack. Then, 2 days after the body was found, an anonymous tipster rang the police. They said that a man named Bevan Spencer von Einem had killed Alan, and the police were like, yep, okay, we'll follow that up. But they were busy looking at people known to Alan because it didn't seem like a random murderer, and there was nothing to connect Alan to Bevan. So it was like, yeah, we'll get around to that.
Von Einem.
It's the Beaumont kids. You mentioned him as a possible suspect in the Beaumont disappearances. Now, in another bizarre twist in the interrelated stories of Adelaide, or perhaps because the population was relatively small, Bevan Spencer von Einem had been at the river the night that the uni lecturer and 2 other victims of police brutality were thrown in the river. In fact, he'd helped one of the victims out of the water and had taken him to the hospital as he'd sustained a broken ankle. So that George Duncan fella who got drowned by the police, not George Duncan, another victim whose name I think is suppressed, von Einem just happened to be there and helped him go to the hospital. So that investigation continues around poor old Alan Barnes, and the family are obviously distraught. They've lost their son, and there seems to be no answer as to who did something so horrifically brutal to him. Fast forward a few months, and we find Neil Muir hanging around at a few gay bars. It's the end of August 1979. Neil was 25 and he lived a transient life. He had been and was a drug addict, which he tried to get off multiple times. To look at, he was slim with shoulder-length hair, and he had tattoos. I have read it reported that he was a sex worker according to people who knew him at the time. He'd been addicted to heroin, but then he unfortunately became, trying to get off that, he got addicted to methadone instead. He fell off the heroin wagon and eventually got addicted to Rohypnol. So things weren't really amazing for poor old Neil.
Is that a thing?
But he was doing his best. Yeah, apparently.
Wow, because that's the date rape drug, isn't it?
Roofies, yeah.
Yeah.
On the last weekend of August, Neil was seen hanging out with a couple of friends. He must have been having a bit of a bender because on the 27th, Monday the 27th, he was so fucked up on drugs and booze that the bouncer chucked him out, and he was last seen staggering down off the street.
So fucked up on drugs and booze that the bouncer kicked him out.
Yeah, he was off his head, right? On Tuesday the 28th, so a day later, a couple of fishermen were off to work on the Port Adelaide River and noticed some black rubbish bags floating at low tide. They appear to have been dropped from a higher wharf, assuming to get rid of them in the sea, but that hadn't panned out. Now, I'm not sure what possessed them, but they decided to have a little look-see at what was in the bags. And I doubt they will ever unsee what was in those bags. The bags contained the remains of Neil Muir. Again, this is really quite disturbing. It's particularly gruesome. Neil's body had been dismembered, but not in the standard cut the legs off, arms, head, bag it up. No, the sicko who did this had dissected him. His organs had been removed and his lower arms and legs had been shoved into his chest cavity of his torso. His tattoos and fingers had been removed and they had also been put in his chest cavity, which makes no sense if the idea was to hide his identity. So I don't really understand why you would take the tat off and then put it there. Anyway. And his head had been cut off and it was in its own bin bag, but then that had been tied to the rest of the remains so that it all sort of stayed together. Like Alan, he had died from blood loss, most likely from an anal injury. The post-mortem showed he'd been penetrated with a large bottle-shaped object with the intention of causing pain and internal injury. He also had a head wound, but whilst it would have been enough to incapacitate him, they didn't think it was enough to kill him.
How have I never heard of this?
Oh, I know, right? That was what my response.
How? It's in my life. I mean, I was little, right? But I 6, but I would have, I'm going to go and ask my parents.
I'm not even sure how much this got, and I'll get onto it in a minute, but
this is insane.
These initial murders, I'm not sure how much press coverage they got. Yeah. So whilst the cavity stuffing activity...
Dawn, what's going on in your state under your watch?
Whilst the cavity stuffing activity... Now, I'm not sure Don was still Premier at this time, to be fair. His second wife had died of cancer and he actually left politics after that. So
We're still in 1979, aren't we?
Yeah.
Are we still only a couple of months after June? Are we still in August?
We're just in August, yeah.
Jesus.
This is Neil Muir, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is quite quick. So the cavity stuffing activity seems a bit over the top. And the police did think the whole dismemberment was designed to help dispose of the body rather than for any other reason. But then the medical examiner found that Neil's genitals had also been mutilated. His penis had been cut and one of his testicles was missing.
Oh.
At that point, they started to think that the killer might have been doing this for sadistic pleasure and probably had done it before, because it was all a bit, what? Like it was really over the top. Now, as Neil was a known drug user, they went down the line of investigating his known associates. Did he owe anyone money, or did someone want to get him out of the picture? Like, was this sort of a revenge thing, or, something to do with drug activity type thing? I mean, even mobsters aren't this revolting as far as I can tell. But when that turned up nothing, they started to look at his friends and his exes and anyone kind of known associates. And one of those freaky coinkydinks happened. One of the investigators of Alan Barnes's murder was following up on that call. Remember, someone rang up and said, "The man you're looking for is Bevan Spencer von Einem." So the policeman goes and has a chat with Bevan. And while he's there, Bevan asks about Neil Muir's murder, totally unprompted by the police. It turns out that Bevan and Neil had been lovers a few years back. Deirdre Chambers. But the investigator is also a little perplexed as to how a man dobbed in as a possible suspect for Alan's death is also linked to a similarly gruesome crime a couple of months later. And that actually might have gone somewhere, but parallel to this discovery, another person was being dobbed in by two separate callers to the police. So the police basically started to look at this other person, and the line of inquiry around
distraction.
Yeah, around Bevan Spencer von Einem went quiet. So
was
Neil
it Bevan who dobbed in the other person?
No, I don't know who dobbed the other person in, but no. Oh, I think there was a bunch of people, I think.
Yeah, right.
But Neil had been associated with a bloke called Dr. Peter Millhouse. And Peter was a recovering alcoholic and a doctor from Mount Gambier, though at the time of Neil's death, he was living alone in North Adelaide. According to people around him, Peter went on a bender after Neil's murder and had to check himself into rehab. So his behaviour around the time was a bit strange. And one of the other things that he had done, I didn't get any further detail on it, was that he had actually rung up his lawyer at the time and got legal advice. And I'm not sure whether it was because he was an alcoholic doctor. I'm not, that could be a red herring. Also of interest was that Peter was one of the friends that Neil was hanging out at the gay bar the weekend before his death. Remember I said he was with two friends? And witnesses said that they'd seemed intimate in the weeks leading up to Neil's demise. Some have suggested that Peter might have been supplying Neil with prescription drugs, but there's nothing to substantiate that. Now, I think it's really important to note that because Neil Muir's organs had been removed, they couldn't do any kind of forensic testing any forensic testing around whether or not there was any substances in his body. He'd been cut up, so he had no blood, he had no organs. They couldn't test tissue, okay?
Okay.
So the cops haven't actually linked the two murders at this time, and the Muir case investigators spent a lot of time trying to get Peter Millhouse for the crime because he's a doctor, so he must have been the person to cut Neil up, right? And I do think it's a rather tenuous link.
It's terrible.
He also had some black bin bags and rope at his house that were very similar, if not the same, as the ones used to tie up the remains of Neil, but they were common, so it was just circumstantial. And whilst there was evidence of blood in his bathroom that had been cleaned up, that's all they had. And they couldn't, it's 1979, pre-DNA. There's probably not enough blood to do any real matching. So it's just blood. We don't know who it belongs to.
But also at the time, in the absence of all of that technology, that would probably seem like much stronger evidence than what it would nowadays.
Yeah, possibly, yeah. But there still wasn't enough. Like even then they could do blood type matching and things like that. I don't think there was enough blood left after someone had cleaned it up for them. They knew there'd been blood there, but it wasn't enough to be able to pull samples and stuff. Yep. So that's all they had on him, but they arrested him anyway, and it went to trial, and Dr. Peter Millhouse was acquitted in 1980 over a year after Neil's death. And it probably also helped that Peter Millhouse was related to, and I think it was his brother, Robin Millhouse, who was the former Attorney General and would go on to be Supreme Court Justice in 1982. Or maybe not. Yeah. Anyway, so having wasted a year pursuing Peter Millhouse, the investigation was pretty stuffed. On August 27, 1981, Peter Stogneff, a 14-year-old schoolboy, decided to wag school and hang out at Rundle Mall with his mate. Peter was 14, young, and he looked young. You know, like when you see photos of him, he's a kid. And he loved playing and listening to music, and he had lovely friends. He was doing good at school. His mum thought he was the most beautiful boy she'd ever seen when he was born. On that fateful day, he stashed his backpack in the garage and he headed off to the mall to see Daniel, his mate. I think he'd actually wagged at another place first. He'd gone to, I think, somewhere like Tea Tree Plaza or something. And then he'd gone back to his house and then he dumped his backpack with the idea to go see Daniel, but he never got there. Peter never arrived and Daniel thought he'd forgotten or just not shown up or just bailed on him. But his teachers at school did notice his absence. And that night his parents started searching for him because he's a 14-year-old boy, you know. They found his backpack in the garage, so they called all his friends because they were like, okay, he's put his backpack there. He's done this on purpose. Finally, I think Daniel caved and told them about the WAG plot, and then they told the police. The police went out looking for Peter, making inquiries in the area, and found out that a kid that looked a lot like Peter had been seen at Tea Tree Plaza in the morning, and he'd gone off with an adult male. But that's all they had, so Peter effectively just disappeared without a trace. Again, 1970, this is 81. Don't think we had video cameras everywhere, CCTV, all that kind of observation. So it is absolutely down to if someone paid attention and noticed something.
And eyewitness testimony being unreliable.
Unreliable at best, anyway, yeah. So 6 months later, a good-looking 18-year-old named Mark Langley was out at a friend's 18th birthday party in Windsor Gardens, northeast Adelaide. And he'd actually gone to this birthday party with his mum and dad and his sisters. So he's there with his family. But then because he's 18, he and his mates, they say, oh, we're going to go out after and have a night out. Unfortunately, he got into a bit of a tiff with his mate Ian and Ian's girlfriend Paula. So they had a bit of a fight over cigarettes or something stupid. And Mark gets out of the car and walks off. And Ian and Paula drive away, and they were parked near War Memorial Drive, overlooking the Torrens River. They drive off, but then they think, oh, we're just being arseholes. So they turn around and come back, but they can't find Mark after that. And remember the Torrens River being an infamous beat as well, and a great place for blokes running around picking people up. So Mark didn't show up at his home, and his dad reported him to the police pretty quickly. I think it was like within 12 or 18 hours. And they did the ring around to all of his mates. Sadly, Mark's body was found 9 days later in Summertown in the Adelaide foothills. He was wearing the clothes he disappeared in, though his zodiac necklace was missing, as was his undershirt. There was no blood on his body, but when they did the postmortem, they found that Mark had been washed thoroughly after his death. He had died from the same type of blood loss from anal injury as the others and had been cut a bit above his groin. And this had been sealed shut with staples and surgical tape.
Fucking hell.
Yeah.
God.
It appeared that whoever had done this was probably accustomed to surgery. The theory regarding why they went to the effort to do surgery on him was that they may have needed to retrieve something that had been embedded in his intestine whilst being sexually assaulted and which may have had fingerprints on it. Mark's body, yeah.
Fucking hell.
Yeah. Mark's body was dumped in the open and the rate of decomposition suggested he'd been there for around a week, suggesting whoever killed him had taken him, abused him for a day or so, and then killed him. And given the way the victims died, I'm not sure the killer really planned when they would die as such. It's not like they were like, I'm going to take you for 2 days. I think they died as a result of the brutalization that they had endured and the blood loss. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's not like the killer was like, I'm going to keep this person for 3 days and then kill them. That's my view anyway.
I'm just going to abuse them until they die.
Until they're to death, yeah.
Yeah.
What they did find with Mark that was different, though, was that he had drugs in his system. He had Mandrax, which was known as Quaaludes in the US. Have you heard of Quaaludes?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, they are. I feel like it's out of movies
They're
and
a
stuff.
sedative
What are
or
they?
something. They're a form of sedative, I think,
Okay.
yeah. And people used to get addicted to them. Captain Sandy from Below Deck, she was addicted to Quaaludes when she was younger. I know
Was
this
she?
because she said it. on the thing. And I thought, what are quaaludes? And I looked it up at the time. In 1979, it was a drug that I think was being used as a date rape drug, possibly.
It says it's a hypnotic sedative.
Yeah, and it was being abused, basically. So they regulated it. So you had to have a prescription to get it. Mandrax is the brand name. So in June 1982, Peter's body was found. Unfortunately, Peter's body had been dumped on a farm, and the farmer was doing some routine planned burns. And so the burning off actually destroyed some of Peter's remains. But also his remains were pretty decomposed too. So his remains were so damaged it's impossible to determine the cause of death. But they could see that he'd been cut up. So there'd been a saw that had cut his bones and stuff. And now that and the timing of his disappearance are the only things that really link him to the other victims, because there's no way, like they can't test for drugs. They don't know whether or not he'd been raped in the same way. Like there's no other evidence because of the state of his body. So now we have 4 victims, and the police are no closer to finding the perpetrators. Well, they don't have enough evidence.
What was going on in Adelaide? Were people just up in arms? That must have been terrifying.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because as Clarkey covered, they got the Beaumont kids' disappearance, and then there was a series of
What year
other
was
things.
that?
That was 66, was it, Clarkey? 55, 66,
I can't
65?
remember now.
I think it was. Yeah, I think it was. And
it
then,
feels like it was in a different time, like an earlier, like a different era to me.
Yeah, well, the
this
60s
feels like,
do.
you know,
This
we're
feels
now on
like
the cusp
our
of the
life.
80s. You know, this, yes, correct. That
Yeah,
the Beaumont children,
66.
yes, that's much earlier, right? We're talking, you know, 40,
It feels
50
it.
years.
Yeah. And then, so you got the Beaumont kids, and then there's, is it the Truro murders? And that's where we haven't covered that one, but that's a serial killer story from Adelaide. Then you've got these 2 little kids who were at Adelaide Oval, and they disappeared.
Jeepers.
Yeah. So there's a whole series of things. And then you've got Derrance Stevenson's death. And then you've got these family murders.
I need to go and talk to some of my friends from Adelaide. I have no idea.
Well, interestingly, like Adelaide's always been called like the city of churches,
Ring them.
right?
Yes,
Don't go and visit them.
Yeah,
no, they live here.
And then it got kind of renamed to the city of murderers, or the city of something or other, right?
Killers, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. And so I did look at the statistics, and even in Dexter says Adelaide over-indexes for serial killers. It's not actually true, but in this particular period,
yeah,
they did have more serial killers per capita than anywhere else.
Per capita, yeah, it had that reputation for a long time.
Yeah, a lot was happening. And the question about this case is, and I don't really talk about it because I'm not sure if there's anything in it, but there's a prevailing theory that some of the people involved in this case were powerful people, high up in government and the police, etc. And that there's, it's a conspiracy theory that it's all been suppressed and they've been protected. And, I'll get on to the fact, how this happens. But yeah, so that's a prevailing thought that, and, in fairness, we talked about Don Dunstan. He was bisexual. Derrance was definitely out, and he was a high profile defense attorney, a lawyer. There were magistrates definitely in the scene. There were doctors in the scene. Whether or not they're so powerful as to be able to get away with this sort of shit.
Why would you want to do this to someone? I mean, if you want to have sex with a young guy, I get that. But why the fuck do you want to murder them and mutilate them? I don't understand. That's a leap, right?
Yeah,
you want to bang young, hot guys. Get it.
I'm
so
not
do
sure.
it. Just don't.
Well, yeah.
But it's
and a lot of that
criminally and then kill.
Yeah. Go on.
Oh, probably 2 points. One about the powerful people. Like if you've got police hunting gays, then there's going to be a level of acceptance around that within the legal fraternity. Otherwise, there would be outrage. So there's people who are allowing that to go on who could otherwise stop it, I would have said. And I also think, Swanee, that the difference between being gay and being a sadistic murderer,
and that is why I haven't made a point about the people doing this. It's not about them being homosexual.
No,
they're pedophiles and they're sadistic monsters.
Yeah, correct.
It's not.
They're enjoying the suffering. It's like being a rapist.
Yeah.
And a murderer.
And if they're attracted to boys and men, it's about as material as someone doing the same thing to women.
Yeah.
they're just sick fuckers, right?
Totally.
Regardless of what their sexual attraction is, yeah? And so I don't really talk about, because what happened in this was, I read this very interesting article about how the media portrayed the whole situation about homosexuals, right? Made it about homosexuals and connected homosexuality and pedophilia in this storyline. And to the point where, the only child in this, the only underage victim in this storyline is Peter.
Yeah.
But they refer to them all as the boys always. They were young men, but they were doing that kind of thing about trying to make sure that in the audience's psyche, we're talking about children. They were very much about monstrous pedophiles, and they are monstrous people, right? But it's the connection to homosexuality that's the offensive bit, because then it tries to turn it into something else, and then it becomes your gay panic, and it becomes your argument against stuff, as opposed to saying these are just sick individuals. Anyway, okay, so now we've got 4 victims, right? But the police are no closer to finding the perpetrators. And they don't, well, I think they don't have enough evidence.
Could you imagine if this happened in this day and age and it became, like, it was public knowledge that there were, what are we up to? We 4 or 5 now? 4?
Well, in this day and age, there's so many armchair detectives that
exactly.
You wouldn't have more than 2 that look like they have, like 2 guys dying from anal injuries.
In a short period of time,
wouldn't you?
Yeah. Yes.
But with they did with Muir. They did know that. So Neil Muir, I don't know why they didn't immediately go, well, that's a bit interesting, isn't it? Both of these guys have been sexually assaulted and raped and penetrated to the point where it's killed them.
Do they, Schmidty, I might have missed it. Have they actually been, like, was there evidence of sex, or was it just the, blunt object kind of thing? Because they both died from blunt objects being inserted to cause pain.
I believe that when we get a little bit further down the story about kind of the way this unfolds, I think that what most likely happened is to each of these victims is they were picked up, they were raped by multiple males, and at some point or other, someone comes along and murders them effectively using, or, and penetrates them with this large bottle-shaped thing, which causes such catastrophic injury as to mask anything else, really, because there's a lot of tearing that causes the blood loss. And if you imagine it, there's injury that you would have from rape, and then there's injury that you would have from a bottle. And I think the assumption is that they absolutely were sexually assaulted by people prior to that injury taking place. Mm-hmm. Whoever was doing this understood forensics enough to know that the bodies needed to be washed afterwards to get rid of as much evidence as possible. And even to that point, Clarkie, there's every chance they flushed these people flushed their victims as well to get rid of semen. So because I haven't read a single thing about semen samples being taken. They had a thing for surgery and cruelty, and they took sadistic pleasure in abusing their victims. But the police didn't link them at this point in time. We got 4 victims, and the police still didn't link them.
I just don't understand. I don't believe
over 3 years. Over 3 years, but still didn't link them. And as I say, you would think they would.
It probably says they weren't very high profile then.
Correct. Yeah. And that's what I was saying. You would have thought that they were so gruesome that if the media had picked these up, these would have been quite sensational. But I'm not really sure that they were. And then it does beg the question of how many other murders were going on that they didn't see a connection, right? And this is, what you were saying before. Actually, there I've written it here, Swanee. It changed from the city of churches to the murder capital of the world. And there was a lot of other shit happening that didn't end in murder that kept the police very busy. So there's a lot of shitty crime happening at this period as well. But then something happened that changed the course of the case. The killer, or killers, made a mistake. They took and killed Richard Kelvin, who was the son of Channel 9 News host Rob Kelvin. And that put them entirely in the spotlight. Mm-hmm. Now, I know some murderers like the spotlight. We've seen several who like to write to the media, BTK, Son of Sam, the Zodiac, to name but 3. But I don't think that whoever was killing these young men and boys wanted to start, to get that kind of attention. They just picked the wrong victim. Richard was a good-looking, athletic kid who was doing really well at school. He was well-liked and had his life ahead of him. On Sunday, the 5th of June, 1983, he was hanging out with his mate, kicking a soccer ball. When his mate caught the bus home, Richard walked back to his and disappeared. So
he and his mates are hanging out in this park. I think his friend's name was Boris, actually. And Richard was wearing a dog collar, as in the family dog's collar. I was confused by that at first. I thought they meant a priest's neck thing, but no, a dog collar from the dog. And according to the family, he just had a quirky sense of humour. He just thought that kind of thing would be quite funny. So he's wearing this dog collar, and his mate's mucking around at the park, and then the mate eventually is like, I've got to go home. So he walks him to the bus stop. Mate catches the bus, he goes, and then Richard is gone. And the police annoyingly thought he was a runaway. And the family no, it's not his behaviour. He wouldn't do that. So this stalled the investigation, and they didn't really start looking for him for 2 days. When they finally did, and they did the door-to-door and all the rest of it, they learned that there were witnesses who heard screams at about 5:30 to 6:30 on the Sunday night. A security guard who lived down the road said he heard a young voice shout out, and then a bunch of other voices, and including one that sounded like a woman's voice, shouting back. Then they heard it sort of ended abruptly, and a car sped off down the street. By the time he looked outside to see what was going on, the car and Richard had gone. And that, my friends, is the end of part 1 of the family murders.
Gosh, stopping it there.
I'm going to stop it there. Yeah.
Bloody hell.
I know. So just sit on that for a bit, because it's disgusting, isn't it? I will cheer you a little by letting you know that Richard is the last victim of this at this point. Okay? Ugh, that's awful, I know. The other thing I do want to say is that, because I didn't write it anywhere else, is that, I mentioned the Crime Investigation Australia documentary or story that I saw. They did something that, I'd read this story when I was doing the Darren Stevenson research, and then I watched that the other day, and it really disturbed me because they actually did reenactments of each victim, which of course they wouldn't know what really happened because they didn't know what really happened, right?
No.
And I realise now that they've built a profile of what they think happened based on other statements of other people, but it was incredibly disturbing. So I will say, if you watch it, they have video or footage of an actor who's acting as one of these victims, and then they don't actually show in graphic detail them being brutalized, but it's enough to turn your stomach and make you think, fucking hell, what those guys suffered is extraordinary.
I'm in a bit of a state of shock.
Yeah, I know, right?
This is terrifying.
I know
that this happened in our country in my lifetime.
I know.
And I'm not aware of it. And I know of, there was stuff that went on in Adelaide, but I wasn't aware of this.
We know about Snowtown, don't we?
Exactly. So how can I be so ignorant that I wasn't aware of this?
I didn't know about it either. You're not alone, right? Yeah. So I just wonder, and it goes back to that question about the hushing hush, right? Who's hushed this up? Why is this?
Why? Yeah.
So, and it's not unheard of. Lots of people have heard of it now, but
yes, of course.
But I'm with you. I knew about Azaria Chamberlain. I knew about the Snowtown murders. There's a big news. I knew about Gary Lynn or whatever Greg Lynn or whatever his name is, who shot Thingo Clay and Russell Hill. And of course our current one, Aaron Patterson.
Yeah,
Patterson. We hear about all of those, but how did we not hear about this? Why hasn't this sat in the Australian psyche?
Yeah, I don't know.
The ones that you've covered, Clarkie, the Hoddle Street Massacre, and those ones. Swanee's never lived in Victoria, but she's heard of those.
Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah.
How did we not hear about this one? Yeah, extraordinary. Anyway, so sit on that for a sec, and I shall regale you with what happens next in part 2.
Oh,
Jeepers!
Got me on the edge of my seat.
I'm sick that day.
All right. Well, on that note, as we say every week, miss you already.
Ciao.
Ciao. Ciao.
Thanks for listening to Trial by Wine. You can contact us at trialbywine@gmail.com. Please rate, review and subscribe to Trial by Wine on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support us, you can become a patron at www.patreon.com, Trial by Wine, or visit our website www.trialbywine.com to donate to us. Your support will help us cover many more cases and apply wacky sentences. We really appreciate you listening and hope you tell everyone about us. Our cover art is by John Christo and music is by Beauchamp from pixabay.com.